Worship report of the Board of Trustees here. As we begin, I ask that you place your electronic devices in worship mode, please, and thank you. I invite you to enjoy the chapel in the back of the sanctuary and to note the joys and concerns in the book there. Please feel free to share a joy or concern there. Children are always welcome in this sanctuary at all times during the service. If you would like us to take care of your little ones during the service, we have a nursery downstairs. We also broadcast the service on closed-circuit TV downstairs at the social hall and near the nursery. After the service, everyone is invited downstairs for coffee and snacks and excellent company. And don't forget to visit the Connie Bates Memorial Library too. Finally, note the announcements in your order of service, which include many ways to participate in the life of this vibrant community. In the words of Rumi, come, come, whoever you are, whether you come with laughter in your heart or tears, you are welcome here. No matter where you've been, no matter where you're going, you are welcome here. No matter what body you brought in the door, no matter who you love, you are welcome here. Whether you believe in God all of the time, some of the time, or none of the time, you are welcome here. If you come with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands, you are welcome here at South Valley Unitarian Universalist Society.
Thank you, Dana. Hi, everyone. I'm Reverend Bob. Good to see you all. 2 quick admin pieces. You should be receiving your tax letters this week if you haven't already. And if you haven't got your pledges in for this year, please do so. It's critical. You can tell the circle of the seasons is happening because the sun is now shining down on the altar again, just like back in the fall. I kind of love that. I think we're actually at we're at the, what's the word? We're at the equinox. Are we close to the equinox? March. Oh man, so far to go. So, house meetings are well underway. We had a great one last night at the Quigley's. If you haven't been to one yet, it's important to sign up. It's good food, it's good company, and it's very important conversations about the future of this beloved community. And there are some changes to the order of service, so take note of that. Wellspring Wednesdays is still going strong. There's so many cool ways that folks are sharing their talents. And speaking of talents, the choir is always welcoming new members. Singing together is a spiritual practice, and I highly recommend it. So, and children can join too, as Leo showed us. So, right? Yeah, woo woo! Nice job this morning. All right. So, speaking of music, I want to welcome Nate Womble, who's subbing for Paul Hill. Paul had a delayed flight last night, and Nate agreed to step in at 10 p.m. last night. So, Nate, we're glad you're here, brother. Nice. And also welcome to Paul Chin, who's the violinist, who's joining us this week. It sounds so beautiful, his contribution. And I really missed you while I was gone last week. I think folks know I'm in the middle of searching for a long-term congregation, and I'll be away every other week for the next 3 weeks, 6 weeks actually. And I appreciate South Valley so much already, but seeing other congregations really just makes it more so. And I preached, you can sense where this is going, right? So last weekend I preached at a church that's not the church I was interviewing at, but they do a thing called neutral pulpit. And 10 minutes into the sermon, the worship associate who was sitting in the front row started to make these very obvious gestures to me that I only had 5 minutes left. So he was going like this. And, everyone's seeing, and I just looked at him and I smiled, and I thought to myself, I flew 2,000 miles to preach this sermon, and it ain't gonna be 5 minutes. But on this day, after yet another hard week out in the world, on this day, this hard week, these hard times, I'm reminded of what the president of my seminary at Beeville Lombard Theological School would say. His name is Lee Barker, and Reverend Lee would say to us, church is for suckers. Church is for suckers. But you know what? We're all suckers. We're all suckers who get tired, who have broken hearts, who keep hoping that things will work out for the best, who want the best for the people that we love. And we carry all this joy and hope and worry to this place, this congregation, but we can lay it down and be together. It's time for some lamentation. You can do that here. So welcome, dear ones, and come. Let us celebrate together. I invite you to rise and body your spirit to sing hymn number 241 in the bleak midwinter. I love singing a Christmas hymn out of season. We're just singing verses 1 and 3. And as we sing, I invite you to consider today's theme of refugees.
To understand where I come from. I think there's something to be gained from sharing our stories. However strange. There is violence and hurt in my family that goes back for, I don't know how far, but I know my Abuela's story. I am a Mexican American, and Abuela is what I call my grandma. She was raised in a small pueblo just after the Mexican Revolution of Emiliano Zapata and Pancho Villa. My grandpa Angel, I call him Grandpa because I never knew him, was 16 years older than her. He fought in that revolution, and unfortunately, he was a violent man. At 15, he killed someone in a dispute over the ownership of some pigs. After the revolution, he profited from the conflict and became co-owner of a banana plantation. Not long before he met my abuela, he and his men killed some people in a brawl, including some important government officials, and he had to go on the run. One of his friends from the war, who had some power and influence, helped him to convert his resources into land and cattle and relocate to the small town where my abuela lived. She was raised in humble circumstances. She was smart. She loved to read and declaim. She spent a lot of her time doing farm and household chores, but in her free time, she read every book she could get. When abuela was 15 years old, Angel came to the house to visit her parents. It didn't matter that Grandpa Angel already had a family in the Pueblo with another woman out of wedlock. He settled on a price of cattle and land with my great-grandparents that greatly improved the resources of the family. My abuela put away her books and her dolls and was married. She describes her wedding night and the 2.5 years that followed as a continual nightmare of rape, violence, and pregnancy. She lived in fear for her life. It was in this climate, excuse me, that my mother was born. It was at this time when my mom was a baby and my aunt was a toddler that Grandpa Angel had a land dispute. That my grandpa had a land dispute that led to a gunfight at their house. My abuela threw her body over my mom and my aunt as the bullets flew overhead. And my grandpa was shot in the head and died instantly. My grandma was so terrified by the violence that she fled to the jungle. I've been to this town, and even today, this is a small place in the jungle in the south of Mexico. It's not a good place. And she hid out there. Her father brought her food and resources until she was able to come back to town that was safe enough. And she lived at home for a while, making clothes, getting by, 17 years old with 2 daughters. And she met and remarried my step-grandpa, Gabriel. And unfortunately, that was not the end of the tragedy in her life. They married and had more kids, and tragedy came again when Abuela's middle daughter, Marty Lou, my aunt, died of a sudden illness at the age of 9. Her grief at the loss of my aunt was profound. She spent many nights sleeping on her daughter's grave, fearful her daughter remained in limbo because her family couldn't afford a special Catholic Mass. A friend of hers remembered that Abuela investigated the Mormon church some years prior, so she contacted members to reach out to her. Deeply comforted by the LDS doctrine of the afterlife, my Abuela and the rest of the family were baptized. This is how my mom met my dad. My dad was one of the missionaries that baptized my mom. And they eventually came here to Utah. And unfortunately, joining the LDS faith did not end the cycle of violence. My abuela disciplined her children with lots of yelling, insults, physical violence, and criticism. It was how she was raised. I was raised the same way. I wasn't sure that it was not only abnormal but wrong until I was in high school and realized my friends were having a different experience. After I moved to Utah, I decided to serve a Mormon mission, and I had an interview with my bishop where he asked if there was disharmony in my home. It took all the courage I had to say yes. I told my story. I pleaded for help. He could have made a big difference in my life, but did nothing. He did nothing. I didn't realize until years later that not only did the church fail my brother, it failed me too. But But I continued to be a part of that religion for 17 more years because I believed that my life, including the abuse that happened to me, my mom, and my grandma, were part of God's plan. However, I did not think it was part of God's plan for me to pass that violence on. I became a transitional character in my family. I metabolized the poison I was given, and I refused to pass it on to my children. Nothing is more important to me than making my children and all children who cross my path feel seen and loved without limits. So, what caused me to begin questioning my LDS faith? A few years ago. It has to do with my core values. I have a strong sense of equality and fairness. And I noticed problems with my faith in my community that were difficult to ignore, and eventually those became impossible to ignore. One of the problems was racism. I have experienced racism from my Mormon community my whole life. I've had to face the fact that this went beyond individual people, and it was actually part of the structure of the organization that I was giving my time and my money to, and my heart. Sorry for all the sniffling. Ugh. And I started to search for a supportive place that would practice and fight for equality, but also honesty and accountability. So it's really important to me in a predominantly white community that I feel accepted for my whole self. That includes my Mexican self. I don't have to hide that on a shelf here. This community accepts all of me just as I am, and it inspires me to help lift others the same way I was lifted up when I came here. You are willing to have these difficult conversations about things that matter to me. And that is why I'm here. Thank you.
That was a great gift and a blessing, please.
I'd like to invite anyone who would like to get a closer look at the book I am about to share with you. So young at heart, or just need to be a little closer. Have you read it? Scaring me. Okay. Thanks, Jan. Yep, that looks great. Thank you. It picks me up quite well. Thank you. Okay, the book is called The Wall in the Middle of the Book. There's a wall in the middle of the book. And it's a good thing. The wall protects this side of the book. From the other side of the book. And if you can't quite see, there is a rhino with a tiger on top and a gorilla on top of that on the other side of the wall. And a mouse underneath them all. This side of the book is safe. Whoa, you might hear these folks up here questioning how safe that is. There's some water rising over there. The other side is not safe. But the most dangerous thing on the other side of the book is the ogre. These guys aren't missing anything up here. You can see see that the water is rising and rising on our night side, and there's a crocodile. Yes. If the ogre ever caught me, he would eat me up. That's why I'm glad there's a wall in the middle of the book, and that I'm on this side of it. Wait a second. What's going on? He finally turned around. This is not supposed to happen on my side of the wall. Do you see what's happening on the other side? And the fish might be piranhas, according to Leo. The big ogre just reached over the wall. Do you see that? Wow, thank you so much. Oh no, I'm on the other side of the book. And you're the ogre who's going to eat me up. You see the ogre's face? The ogre's face is priceless. Just saved you, dude. Ha ha ha. I'm actually a nice ogre, and this side of the wall is fantastic. Come on, I'll show you around. Looks like he has to think about it for a second. Hey, ogre, wait for me. There they go. All right, I invite the young folks to head downstairs for religious exploration.
Let us now enter into a time of prayer, of reflection, of meditation. The Dalai Lama says that no matter what we believe, we all worship in the temple of our own hearts. Let us seek the holy now as we understand it in the temple of our hearts. We lift up those who are lonely and those who lack for food or housing. May they find security and comfort. We lift up those who struggle with their health, be it physical or mental, emotional or spiritual. May they find healing. And we lift up the caregivers. May they know that through their efforts, they bring love into the world. We celebrate those who fight for justice. May we draw hope from their example. We lift up those carrying wounds from their experiences in churches and religious institutions. May we remember that when we come into spiritual community, we bring our deepest sense of self. And may we always be gentle with one another. May the wounded find healing and wholeness. We lift up those who are excluded from their families because of what they believe or who they love. May they find peace. And we celebrate the gathering of families, those biological families and the families we create out of love, the families we choose. We give thanks for this Unitarian Universalist congregation. May it be healthy in process and fruitful in outcome. We celebrate the things that bring us hope, the eternal possibilities of learning, of laughter, of growth. Let us see the beauty and holiness in the streets that we travel on. Let us see the beauty and holiness in the people that we serve. Let us see the beauty and holiness in each other. Let us see the beauty and holiness in ourselves. And may we all be held in the heart of love. Amen.
is our practice here at South Valley to split our worship service offerings with a charitable organization or program that aligns with our values and principles. For January and February, the offering will be split with No Kid Hungry. In America today, 1 in 6 kids faces hunger. Working with local partners across the country, No Kid Hungry is ending childhood hunger by ensuring that kids get the food they need, like healthy breakfast at school and free meals during the summertime. Will you join with me in saying the words printed in your order of service? We are this church. We are its hands, its heart, its voice. Together we share the wealth of this community and sustain it with our gifts.
Blessings on these gifts and these givers.
The poem I will read is called Home by Warsan Shire. He was born in Kenya to She was born in Kenya to Somali parents in 1988 and grew up in London. No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. You only run for the border when you see the whole city running as well. Your neighbors running faster than you, breath bloody in their throats. The boy you went to school with, who kissed you dizzy behind the old tin factory, is holding a gun bigger than his body. You only leave home when home won't let you stay. No one leaves home unless home chases you. It's not something you ever thought of doing until the blade burned threats into your neck, and even then you carried the anthem under your breath, only tearing up your passport in an airport toilet, sobbing as each mouthful of paper made it clear that you wouldn't be going back. You have to understand that no one puts their children in a boat unless the water is safer than the land. No one spends days and nights in the stomach of a truck feeding on newspaper unless the miles traveled means something more than journey. I want to go home, but home is the mouth of a shark. Home is the barrel of the gun, and no one would leave home unless home chased you to the shore. Unless home told you to quicken your legs, leave your clothes behind, crawl through the deserts, wade through the oceans, no one leaves home until home is a sweaty voice in your ear saying, leave, run away from me now. I don't know what I've become, but I know that anywhere is safer than here.
I just want to say in advance, thanks for doing the work today. This is we're grappling as real grown-ups in a grown-up faith tradition with hard things. And there's real power in that, but I also want to acknowledge that it's hard. So thanks for showing up. So I decided to preach on migrants and immigration and refugees on this Sunday more than a month ago. I can't remember exactly what it was, but back then I had no idea that we'd be in the moment we're in. I knew that immigration was a political issue, but I also felt like it was a spiritual issue. And I had no idea that this morning, Sunday, February 17th, it would be the political issue. So in seminary, we were taught that when we're preaching on a topic that has political implications, we should prepare appropriately. So please allow me a moment to prepare. Okay, I'm ready. All right, I'm not going to wear this silly thing. But my hope is that we can understand this issue both with our minds and with our hearts. That we can see this moment as a political and a spiritual crisis, with political and spiritual perils and genuine spiritual opportunities. We live in a refugee world now, where changes in climate, declining resources, dictatorships, economic disasters, religious fundamentalisms, these all cause people to make a journey that is more than a journey, not as travelers, but as refugees. The poet Warsaw Shire says, no one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. You only run for the border when the whole city is running as well. You have to understand that no one puts their children in a boat unless the water is safer than that land. When I hear politicians say that we should accept refugees, I see the face of someone that I deeply care about. I see my friend Tariq, who was a translator I knew from my time in Afghanistan. Tariq lived in Kandahar and he worked at the Pashtun language radio station that we had on the base. The Taliban knew that he was doing it, and they would call his house saying that they were going to kill him and his family. And Tariq just wanted his family to be safe. He has 3 daughters, and he said to me, if the Taliban wins, my children have no future. This devout Muslim risked his and his family's lives to support the USA. He tried for years to get a visa to the US and was still trying when I left in 2013. Our little UU congregation at Kandahar did what we could. We wrote letters to our Congress people on his behalf. And Tariq and I stayed in touch on Facebook after he left. Then his messages stopped. And I assumed he was dead. Another statistic. Here in our home of the United States, we have a refugee crisis too, but we politely call it the immigration issue. And I have to admit that until a few years ago, I was pretty ignorant about the realities for refugees at our southern border. In 2014, I went to Tucson, Arizona, as part of a border justice trip with the UU College of Social Justice. So the UU College of Social Justice is an amazing organization. They offer powerful experiential learning opportunities. They go to places where the pain is, like the Arizona border and Honduras and New Orleans and Nicaragua. Folks can go as individuals, but they can also go as a congregation, which is a fantasy of mine. Just to take note of that. While I was there, we met with activists and lawyers. We saw the factories on the Mexican side of the border and the shanty towns in the shadow of those factories. We walked in the desert where hundreds of migrants die every year trying to get to security in the U.S. This is the same desert where, it's the Sonoran Desert, where activists from the organization No More Deaths were recently arrested for leaving water for the migrants. It's come to this. Humanitarian aid is now a crime. If you're not angry yet, you can go to the No More Deaths website and watch videos of Border Patrol officers kicking over those jugs of water, emptying them out, stabbing them with their knives. These are the jugs that the folks from No More Deaths would leave for the migrants. And I went to a federal courthouse, and that's what I want to tell you about. So Operation Streamline, catchy name, is a special federal court set up to process only people captured by the U.S. Border Patrol as they attempt to enter the country. It is essentially an efficient factory of deportation. Every session, twice a day, 70 refugees are marched into the courtroom in chains. They don't have belts, so they're always holding their trousers. They're brought up to the judge in groups of 5, accompanied by their court-appointed attorney. Their court-appointed attorney, their representation, maybe will have spent at best 15 minutes with them prior to the trial. The judge reads from a script, announcing the charges. A translator repeats the charges in Spanish, sometimes other languages, because there's a lot of dialects in Central America. Then, as their names are read, each refugee is told to lean forward to the microphone and say, culpable. That's guilty in Spanish. One after another, each refugee speaks, culpable, culpable, culpable. I will say I saw one tiny moment of resistance. One of the refugees would not say culpable. I never learned what happened to him. For the rest of the folks who pled guilty, instead of just being deported, they're sent to prison for 1 to 6 months, and then they're released at the border of Mexico or flown in charter planes to their home country. Sitting there for a couple hours, the effect of the repetition of the charges and the pleas was maddening, then numbing, then deeply disturbing. There is something deeply wrong about evil that is sanitized and efficient and boring. Wrong. And that's what our immigration policy is. It's morally wrong and it's terribly inefficient. The refugees risk so much and endure so much suffering, and the best we can do is make them sit in jail before we deport them. Between the court expenses and the cost of imprisonment, the program costs more than $100 million a year just in Arizona. The idea of a journey is a spiritual concept. But the journey I want to talk about isn't the journey of a family from Honduras risking their lives to escape the violence in their home country. I invite those of us who live in the U.S., those of us who have the gift of citizenship, the privilege, I invite us to go on a spiritual journey of accountability. And that journey starts when we identify who benefits from this current system. Who benefits? The military contractors who sell equipment to the Border Patrol and other law enforcement agencies. Culpable. The Management Training Corporation, the for-profit company that operates prisons that hold immigrants. And by the way, their headquarters is in Centerville, Utah. Culpable. Policymakers at the U.S. Border Patrol who create state terror by directing officers to demand ID from anyone speaking Spanish, as happened to 2 U.S. citizens in Montana recently. and to confront travelers in bus stations. Notice the classism, it's bus stations, not train stations or airplanes. I was just in Grand Central Station, I didn't see any border patrol. Culpable. And above all, politicians who appeal to the voters' fears and bigotry in order to keep power. Culpable. Culpable, culpable, culpable. The next step in our spiritual journey is to awaken both our hearts and our minds. We need to learn why migrants come to our countries. In other words, how did their homes become the mouth of a shark? There's a great documentary called Harvest of Empire that offers a really solid explanation in 90 short minutes about the U.S.'s role in creating chaos in Central America. You can watch it for free on YouTube, and that will awaken your mind. And there's another great documentary called Who is Diane Crystal? That follows the path of one refugee going north. And seeing the refugees' faces and hearing their stories, that will awaken the heart. And if you have the time and the resources, I strongly recommend going on one of those UU College of Social Justice Border Links trips, Justice at the Border. I promise you that will be the journey of a lifetime. It was for me. And I know that this spiritual journey of accountability can seem daunting, but we don't need to be stuck in a place of despair. Rebecca Solnit writes beautifully about this in her essay, Hope in the Dark. Solnit says that hope and pessimism are different sides of the same coin. Hope and pessimism are both ways of saying, I know what's going to happen. It's saying, all is lost, or love will win, and leaving it at that. Solnit says that both are equally wrong, and that the real hope comes from us. We can't just sit around and hope. We have to create hope by working hard to create a better world, one little victory for justice at a time. That's a call to action. This aligns with my theology of humanism, that it's up to us humans to create salvation in this world rather than waiting for salvation in the next. In this world. Unfortunately, there are a lot of options for action. We can volunteer our time or offer our financial support to excellent organizations. A great place to start is at our sister congregation, First U, just up the road. The sanctuary effort there, which this congregation had a significant hand in creating, that sanctuary effort is now over a year old. Offering sanctuary, as many folks know, requires an incredible amount of volunteer hours. So I know they'd appreciate the help. Another great organization in Salt Lake is the Refugee and Immigrant Center of the Asian Association of Utah. They serve the general community, not just Asian folks. They do amazing work. There's a lot of volunteer roles that are available, ESL, helping folks integrate. It's really a great place to work. And I also strongly recommend doing advocacy work. There's the direct service work, which is important, but advocacy work is fundamental because the best change is systemic change. So I encourage you to check out Love Resists, which is a program of the Unitarian Universalist Association. And I'll send a follow-up email with all these organizations and references, so you can check it out yourself. But the spiritual question here is, will we choose love over fear? Every time, every little moment that we choose love, we get a little more free, a little lighter, a little more joyous. And there's another thing about this journey. You won't be traveling alone. There are lots of folks out there who want to welcome the refugees, not demonize them. And I'll point right here to our Unitarian Universalist movement that's doing this work. I want to read an excerpt from a statement that our denomination president, Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, made this week in response to the declaration of emergency. Reverend Frederick Gray says, the first principle of Unitarian Universalism declares the inherent worth and dignity of all people. We refuse to be silent as the Trump administration continues to escalate violence and terrorism against people because of their ethnicity and immigration status. The manufactured need to create a national emergency furthers a dangerous narrative that immigrants, undocumented people, and those who are migrating are dangerous. Villainizing entire groups of people to justify detaining, hurting, and isolating them is not new. History shows us that without righteous indignation and faithful disruption, families will continue to be separated and lives will continue to be lost. Our faith calls us to be on the side of justice, and our compassion calls us to be on the side of the most vulnerable. Reverend Susan Frederick Gray. I want to finish my story about Tariq, my interpreter in Afghanistan. So Tariq went silent, and I feared the worst. I actually have trouble getting to the story. It's been years. I feared that he'd been shot by the Taliban like his cousin, and then one cold day in February, a couple years ago, I got a Facebook message from Tariq, and he told me that he got visas for him and his family, and he'd arrive in Buffalo in 2 weeks notice. And I cried like I'm crying now when I got that news. And me and my chaplain from Afghanistan, who was then serving a congregation in Albany, we rallied our communities, and we got his apartment set up, and we got beds and toys and clothes for his kids, and we welcomed his Muslim family into the bosom of our community. We weren't alone in that effort. There were a lot of great folks in the great resettlement agency that helped make that happen. So there's an organization of Catholic women religious, or nuns, that's called the Sisters of Mercy. And the Sisters of Mercy, as you would expect, they know a lot about mercy. And they define mercy as tender courage. Tender courage. What does it mean to be tender and courageous? It's a question for us as a country. Can we use our incredible strength and wealth to be gentle and brave? Are we a people that hides behind a wall? Or are we a people that shares our good fortune with others? We're being told that we need to hide, but the story of Tariq, the sanctuary at First Jew, and so much more proves to us that we can be a people of generosity, of interdependence, of tender courage. My prayer for us is that we commit to a spiritual journey, a journey of choosing love over fear. And on this journey, we bring our minds and our hearts and our actions to bear to make a more just and caring world. To which I say, amen, and blessed be. I invite you to rise in body or spirit for our closing song, number 1020 in the Teal hymnal, Woyaya.
Amen. chalice, but not the light of truth, the water of community, or the energy of action. These we hold in our hearts until we leave. May we all find our own tender courage, and may we be companions to everyone on their spiritual journeys. Our worship is over, our service begins. Go in peace, gentlemen.